Hi, this is your host, Laura Powers, and I'm so pleased today to have Dani Hamilton on the show. She is a functional nutritional therapy practitioner, and we're here to talk about PCOS, which stands for polycystic ovary syndrome, and insulin resistance. Thanks so much for being a guest on the show.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to be here.
So I'm really excited to talk about this. This is something that's very close to my heart and my personal health journey as I was diagnosed with PCOS when I was kind of beginning my alternative health journey and trying to figure out what's going on. And it was really key to me shifting my health as a whole. So it sounds like you also have a personal story with PCOS. I'd love to hear what got you into your work as a whole, as well as focusing on this in particular.
Yeah, sure. So as a kid, I was a pretty sick kid. I had allergies, asthma, lots of sinus infections and strep throat, and got my tonsils removed. And I was, not always well. And I realized that's from a lot of food sensitivities and things that I shouldn't have been eating when I was younger that didn't agree with my body. And in 2012-ish, I adopted a paleo diet, which is essentially just a real foods diet. And so many things reversed for me. I got rid of my allergies, got rid of my asthma, was almost never sick again. And I saw so much healing just from switching my diet from processed foods to real foods. And it was really, really amazing. But I was starting to struggle with some other things. I always tell my clients healing happens in layers, and then this thing started popping up. So I cleared away all that immune stuff, but then all of a sudden I started gaining weight. I started having worsening of adult acne, a lot of acne on my chin. And I was like,
I did
wait,
too. I had that also, and it sucks.
oh my gosh, yeah. It's so hard to wear your issues on your face, especially when you're someone who's in the health and nutrition field and, you feel like you want to put a good face to what you're promoting. And I was getting cystic acne. It was painful. It was embarrassing. I had weight loss resistance, and I missed my period for about 6 months. And then they were very sporadic. I was having a lot of PMS and emotional symptoms. I had really low energy. And I kind of looked online and self-diagnosed myself with PCOS. And then I went to a gynecologist and I was like, listen, I'm really struggling. I can't lose weight. I have all these symptoms. I really think I have PCOS. And he looked at me and he's like, well, you need to lose weight and there's no cure for PCOS and you have to take the pill. I was like,
Oh gosh.
whoa,
That is
what?
like the worst possible approach ever.
The worst, the
Yeah.
worst. I was like, I'm sitting here, like, it was really hard for me to feel like how I felt in my body. I was overweight. I don't know how many pounds overweight, but I felt uncomfortable and embarrassed. And he was like, you have to lose weight. I mean, what? And
As if you don't
unfortunately,
know that
yeah,
and like you're not already trying,
I was
probably,
like,
right?
exactly. I'm like, dude, that's the first thing I told you when I walked in here. Like, I can't. And I was trying and I couldn't. And I hear this from so many women. They're like, I just can't lose weight. I'm trying to do everything. I'm doing everything right. And then I get so many women who are telling me they're just like cutting their calories and working out, and it's not working for them. And it's like, I've been there and it's a horrible place to be in. And I'm sorry if that's you, but the good news is that there's so much more we can do. So anyway, I did get a diagnosis of PCOS. I told him that I do not want to take the pill, and I didn't take it. And I walked out of there and I was like, I am fixing this myself. I don't care what anyone says. So for a while, I tried, really focusing on a lot of the things that many PCOS practitioners talk about. And these are holistic people. They talk about raising your progesterone and doing things to decrease your testosterone. But it never made a really big impact. And then one day I was driving and I was listening to a podcast and I heard someone say that PCOS is the diabetes of the ovaries. And I just about, got in a car accident because I was just so blown away. I had never heard that before. And so I started researching it, and I would see a lot of information where it's like women with PCOS oftentimes have insulin resistance. But as it turns out, a root cause of PCOS, they kind of have it backwards. The root cause is the insulin resistance plus inflammation. And so I started to approach my PCOS from the lens of working on lowering my inflammation and working on my insulin resistance, which I'm happy to explain what that means because it's pretty complicated and most people are familiar with that term, but don't really know what it means. So we'll go into that in a bit if that's okay.
Yeah.
And so I started working on my insulin resistance and my periods normalized. I almost never got a pimple again. My weight went down effortlessly, and I didn't have any more symptoms. So I say that I don't have PCOS anymore because it's just a collection of symptoms. If you don't have those symptoms, you don't have it. So there we go.
Great. Yeah, you and I have a lot of parallels because I had always been a relatively, thin kind of athletic person, and then all of a sudden I just kind of hit this wall and I started to gain weight and, was counting my calories, working out, not losing it. And it was like, what's going on? Like, this has never been like this for me in the past.
Yeah.
And I think this happens for a lot of women where my symptoms were just underneath the bar of what they would consider typical PCOS symptoms. So right on the borderline of overweight and obese, but the way that I carry my weight, I wouldn't say that I looked really heavy. Like most people, when they heard how heavy I was, they were surprised because I carry it like really evenly in my body.
Right.
But I didn't feel good for me. Like I'm not a person that focuses on the numbers, but I was about 50 pounds heavier than I am now. And I just didn't feel good. Like my joints hurt. I felt like, well, this is just what it's like to get older. This sucks, and by the way, I was 30. It's not like I was ancient or something like,
right.
my old age of 30, I'm getting old and my body's falling apart.
Right.
That's kind of what it felt like. And I went to several doctors and, the first one was like, you're just depressed. Here's the depression pill, depression medication, which I didn't take because I inherently yeah, I'm definitely kind of bummed out, but I don't think that's what's causing this. Like there's something else that's causing it. And now I know PCOS causes hormonal imbalances, right? So that really impacts how you feel. And then I wasn't sleeping and no one was giving me any information that was helpful. I went to several doctors and then I was reading Dr. Oz's book, You Want a Diet. And it said, you might have PCOS if you have and it listed all these symptoms. And I was like, check. And when I went into the doctor I then made an appointment with my OBGYN and I said, I think I have this. Can you check? And she tested my ovaries and she just literally felt them and was like, yes, you have this, and that was it. And it was so frustrating to me because it was like, how is it that I've had to diagnose this myself basically and then just get confirmation? And I think that happens for a lot of women. And if you're just waiting for your practitioner to, your doctor or whoever you're going to that you may not fall within the parameters where they think, oh, that's obvious because I wasn't extremely overweight. I guess they thought if I was a lot more overweight, then they would have thought. But to me, I'm very sensitive. To me, that was enough overweight to really feel it in my body. And the other thing that's frustrating to me about this is I was diagnosed with hypoglycemia when I was in high school. And when I learned about insulin resistance, I was like, oh my gosh, I've just been building this in my body ever since then. And no one ever told me, I was pulled off of, I didn't eat refined sugars very much, but I still ate a lot of high glycemic foods. And so I was never warned by the sort of medical establishment about just watching high glycemic foods, period. So I ate grains, I ate dairy and, starches, potatoes, things like that.
Yeah.
And so
rice cakes.
No
exactly. Sugar and rice cakes.
But yeah. And so for me, what has worked is really just basically eating very low carb. I'm just highly sugar sensitive. So that's what's worked for me for the insulin resistance. And now I've basically healed it. I don't, my period's regular. I don't have all the crazy acne and everything you time. I had hair growth. I had to get laser hair removal. It's horrible.
Oh, wow. Yeah. I didn't have the hair growth or the male pattern baldness that tends to happen.
Oh, thankfully I didn't have the male pattern baldness.
Yeah. So I didn't have that either. And not every woman has to have every symptom, right? And some women have cysts on their ovaries, but don't have PCOS. And some women with PCOS don't have cysts on their ovaries. So that's not the defining criteria to be considered to have the disorder. So it's Yeah, it's pretty tricky to get a diagnosis. And then a lot of women, when they do get a diagnosis, they're, told things like I was, they're made to be shamed into taking medication. And I just want to, tell anyone listening, don't wait to get a diagnosis to do something, right? You can do all this on your own. The doctors, technically, I feel like their only tool in their toolbox is a prescription pad. And there are no prescriptions that can fix this, because this is a disorder of diet and lifestyle. No
Right.
pill can cure something of diet and lifestyle. So you need to do the diet and lifestyle pieces on your own, and that's how you reverse it. So yeah,
So
it's difficult with the mainstream medical, but don't be dependent on them. Like, you can do this all on your own.
yeah, completely. Yeah, I did too. That's actually, it was a leading driver for me to start my podcast, to find
Love
alternative
that.
health practitioners to try to heal. Because I was like, clearly this, take the depression medication and the pill is not going to do it for me.
Right. Those are
Because it's
Band-Aid
not,
approaches.
yeah, it's not dealing with like, okay, but why do I feel down? Why
Right.
are my hormones messed up? Like, there's something causing this imbalance in my body, and I need
Yes.
to address that. So for those who aren't familiar with PCOS, we've talked about some of the symptoms, but can you go through, like, kind of all the pretty common symptoms that people might have, to know that they might have
Sure.
it? Because I think many listeners are listening to this right now that don't realize they have it, and they do.
Yeah. So one of them is the cysts on the ovaries, but again, you don't need to have those in order to have PCOS. You may have any of these collection of symptoms. You don't need to have all of them, but weight loss resistance, or gaining weight even when you're trying to lose it, having irregular or absent periods, absence of ovulation, that's really the biggest one. And it's kind of hard to know if you are not ovulating, but PCOS is the biggest cause of infertility in women. And things like acne, especially cystic acne, cyclic acne with your periods, or if like with your cycle, and male pattern baldness, like we talked about, and growth of facial hair are some of them. And then you might also see some secondary ones, such as depression, which you mentioned too, some mood issues, and joint issues. But this is all coming from these underlying causes of the insulin resistance and the inflammation. So I saw, a post that's like, many women with PCOS also have insulin resistance. And it's like, no, many women with insulin resistance also have PCOS. So it's kind of backwards the way it's presented to us. And when we can really focus on that root cause, we can start to see the improvement of the symptoms. So
Yeah, and one of my big symptoms, which I haven't really seen talked about, but I think goes with hormonal issues, which obviously people with PCOS tend to have, was I had a hard time sleeping. I had
yeah.
insomnia, and I'd never had that in my life. Like, I've always been a very heavy sleeper, someone that could fall asleep easily. So this was very new to me, just kind of like the weight loss, not being able to lose weight and
Yeah.
gaining weight. I think it was just like, what? Like, what is going on? Like, this is very not normal for me. So I'm just passing that on. I don't know if it's on the official list of symptoms, but for me, that was definitely something that I experienced.
Well, that is one of the symptoms of insulin resistance, is difficulty
Okay.
sleeping. So a lot of times with insulin resistance, we'll see people not being able to fall asleep, or people not being able to stay asleep. So when we have insulin resistance, we generally have, obviously we have dysregulated blood sugar, and this will affect our adrenal glands. And maybe you've heard of adrenal
Mm.
fatigue or
Oh,
HPA
yeah.
axis dysfunction. So every time we spike our blood sugar and it drops and crashes, then our adrenal glands need to step in and raise our blood sugar, like in an emergency. And this is a very expensive, like a metabolically expensive process for our adrenal glands, because it needs to pump out cortisol and epinephrine. So to create those hormones, it needs a lot of nutrients. So essentially, it's like an expensive process. You drain yourself of these nutrients, and then your body is just, the hormonal output decreases. So you kind of have low hormones after that, leaving you feeling tired. So if we're dysregulating our cortisol because we're pumping it out all day, what happens is we either have low hormone output altogether, which leaves us feeling sluggish throughout the day, tired, no energy, Or we could start to see this kind of reverse cycling with our cortisol, which is our main stress hormone. Cortisol should be nice and high during the morning hours and slowly taper off throughout the day. So this allows us to have energy in the morning so we can, take on our day, and then slowly it lowers, and then at night it should be nice and low so we can easily fall asleep. But a lot of people who have dysregulated blood sugar and high stress levels, because also stress, of course, impacts our blood sugar regulation and our cortisol. So we see the cortisol go up at night, and then we wake up and it's really low. So we're reverse cycling. So it's low in the morning, you're slow to start, you need a lot of caffeine, and slowly throughout the day, you get more and more energy. And then at night, you're tired, but you're wired. So you're up because you're all this revved up on the inside, because that's your cortisol is too high. So if that's you, that's one of these signs. And then the other one is, like I mentioned, if your blood sugar drops too low, if you have this hypoglycemia type insulin resistance, your blood sugar can drop in the middle of the night. And then, like I mentioned, your adrenal glands will pump out all these stress hormones like cortisol and epinephrine, aka adrenaline. And so you wake up with this pounding heart. And those are the people who are unable to kind of fall back asleep. And that is another sign of the dysregulated blood sugar and insulin resistance.
Yeah, I think I was definitely the first one. And I was also drinking a lot of caffeine because I'd wake up and I was like a zombie, and then I'd have caffeine, and that also further drains your adrenals, right? So it was like this
100%
horrible cycle. I just couldn't, like always exhausted, no energy, couldn't sleep, which just compounds the issue. When you can't sleep, that's when your body regenerates. So it's just basically like breaking down. And so this, idea of like being able to heal it from diet, that was really what I did. I mean, I think there were also some lifestyle changes. I left my marriage, changed what I was doing for work. So these were things that definitely had created stress in my life, and therefore inflammation. But I think for me, a huge part of it was just changing how I ate and just approaching it differently. So before we get into that, can you just explain, like, from a technical perspective, what is happening when there is insulin resistance?
Sure. So when we eat anything with carbohydrates or sugar, the amount of sugar in our blood, which needs to be at this happy range. So we have about a teaspoon of sugar in our blood at all times, and it likes to stay in this happy range. And so when we eat anything with carbs or sugar, the amount of sugar in our blood goes up. And once it goes up above a certain amount, our pancreas senses that, and then will secrete a hormone called insulin. And insulin's job is to help take the sugar out of the blood and put it into the cells of the body. And that makes the blood sugar that has just risen go back down to that normal range. However, our society, like the foods that we have available, are these very processed foods that contain tons of refined flours, refined sugar. And so we're not, eating one apple a day. We're eating pizza and donuts and cereal for breakfast, and followed by, mac and cheese, and then a sandwich. And it's just carb, 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 carb. So we are constantly spiking our blood sugar, and then the insulin's job is, storing it away in the body. So the insulin will put sugar in the body so it can be used for energy. But like I said, we tend to overeat carbohydrates, and that's nobody's fault. This is, what they want us to do. This is our society. These are commercials telling us, they demonize fat a long time.
Foods too. They're the cheap foods and the foods that have shelf life.
Life, exactly.
So it's like convenient for the manufacturers, the grocery stores.
Exactly.
Easy to store, but that doesn't mean they're good for our bodies.
Totally. I love that point, because so this is not our fault. Like I always like to make that clear that, I'm not blaming anyone for eating carbohydrates. I grew up on a diet of like cereal and, granola bars and all that stuff. Of course, I had to have like Special K, the healthy cereal, but it's really not. But like, of course, my mom was trying to do her best, but this is the information we're given. We're not given the right information. So anyway, I digress. We are spiking our blood sugar, and then the insulin is taking it and putting it in the cells of the body to use for energy. But a lot of times we have excess. And so what happens then? It stores the sugar or the fat in the blood as body fat. So then we are in this pattern of gaining weight. But the insulin spiking over and over and over, the cells kind of become resistant to this message to put the sugar away. And so there's a theory by Dr. Jason Fung that the cells kind of just get too full with sugar. And to me, that makes a lot of sense. It's like, where else is it going to go? Like,
Right.
how much sugar can some people get into their cells? And so for whatever reason, there's this resistance. And it's just kind of like, if a kid comes knocking at your door every day at 12 o'clock, you're going to listen to him the first few days. What is that? Oh, it's just a kid. Sooner or later, it's like, oh, that kid just does that. You don't even hear it. That's when we become resistant to something. Or like you are listening to music, you turn up the volume loud, and then all of a sudden it doesn't feel loud to you anymore. We've become resistant to that message. So our brain naturally does that. Our body naturally does this. So this is what we call that resistance. And so now the glucose is not getting into the cells where it needs to be. So we will feel hungry. We will feel tired because we're not getting the glucose we need, even though our body is filled with this stored body fat. And then when you have insulin in your blood, you are in this fat storage mode. So when you're in a fat storage mode, your body literally cannot burn that body fat. So that's where we see this weight loss resistance piece. It comes from not being able, from having high insulin levels. So that insulin levels blocks our body's ability to burn body fat. So some ways to reduce insulin, which help, are fasting to kind of take that insulin down because we're not adding anything in. Exercise, especially our leg muscles, they're our biggest muscles, that can help to lower the insulin resistance. And then diet, by not adding in high carbohydrate foods to keep these insulin levels up. One of the big things is snacking. Nothing raises your insulin like snacking all day. It keeps the insulin levels up. Another thing we find with insulin resistance is that there's also this hypoglycemic part of it. And this is what I experienced. That's what you said you had in high school. So
yeah, and I was diagnosed in high school. I think I continued it afterwards, but it's interesting because I pretty much never have a hypoglycemic issue now that I eat like paleo / keto, low carb. Like it just doesn't happen, like almost never. And so I think even this being an issue, hypoglycemia, is also just a sign of like, you have insulin resistance, you are eating too many sugars and carbs for your body probably.
Yeah, with the hypoglycemia. So I think it's what I was saying to you before we got on is that so many people don't know what even just like dysregulated blood sugar looks like, because blood sugar dysregulation is a spectrum, and the very end of that spectrum is diabetes. And that's where we hear things like, foot amputations, blindness, kidney disease, dementia, but we don't hear anything before then. So we do hear, okay, insulin resistance, maybe some people associate it with weight loss resistance, or like, oh, you are pre-diabetic, that means you're going to get diabetes, but what does it even feel like? So if I'd like to talk about just a few symptoms so people might be able to kind of piece this, and even the hypoglycemic moments. So blood sugar dysregulation can feel like fatigue or fluctuating energy levels. So maybe you're really tired and then you eat and you feel better, or vice versa, you eat and then you get extremely tired. Those are signs of blood sugar dysregulation. Someone who depends on stimulants like caffeine to get through the day. Someone who's craving sweets or carbohydrates.
Chocolate. If you like need your chocolate, or wine, because that's one thing a lot of people aren't, I think, factoring in, is alcohol is very sugary. So if you are really craving that, like for me, that was the last thing I gave up was alcohol, because I gave up everything else, and then it was like, I got to give up the sugar alcohols too.
Yes, definitely. Yeah. So another one is trouble falling asleep and staying asleep, which we already talked about. This was me. This was the biggest one I had. If a meal is missed, someone might feel shaky. I used to get so shaky. I could not fast. I did fasting blood work. I'm like, oh my God, this is going to be terrible.
I still
my
can't
blood
fast.
sugar. My blood sugar was 60 when I tested it and I fasted. It should be 80 to 88. and mine was 60. That's so low. So
Yeah.
when you have that, that's hypoglycemia. When you have that moment where you feel shaky, irritable, lightheaded, jittery, or even hangry. How many times have we heard
Oh
that?
yeah.
Those people who are like, oh, hangry problems. It's like, you have dysregulated blood sugar, my love. You know,
No. Yeah,
that's what that is.
you should not feel angry when you're
Mm-mm.
hungry. Like we kind of
No.
think that's a normal thing, but I'm like, no,
Right.
that means that something's off because you should just feel hungry,
Yes.
your stomach should growl or whatever, but it shouldn't create like an emotional response
Yeah.
if
Yeah.
your system is operating in a healthy way.
Right. And it's those people who don't have that ability to tap into that stored body fat. That's how I was. And because our metabolisms are so damaged from overeating carbohydrates, we should be able to go from burning fat and ketones for fuel to burning sugar for fuel, depending on which one is available. And when the sugar goes away, we should be able to tap into our stored body fat. That's what's called metabolic flexibility. And that is the goal of a ketogenic diet, is to get back that metabolic flexibility that we were all born with, because we're all born in ketosis, which I think is really interesting.
I
So
didn't know that. That's fascinating.
yeah. And if babies are exclusively breastfed, they're also in ketosis. So anyway, if you don't have that ability from having this damaged metabolism, you are just dependent on the sugar that you take in, and you can only burn that. And so when the blood sugar is dropping and you don't have metabolic flexibility, your body's like, oh my God, we're going to die. So then there's that adrenal response again to step in, but it just can't burn what's already on you and use and realize that it has all this fuel stored. And so, I mean, that's the point. That's why our body stores fat, to use its fuel for later. So
If I can
someone,
just make a comment too,
of
that I think
course.
a lot of people who have anxiety, this is what's
Oh,
underneath it.
oh my
Like
gosh.
they suffer from
Yes.
anxiety and they just think they have panic attacks or something, and it's actually a blood sugar issue.
100%. And that was literally my next one,
Oh my
is
gosh.
that,
Okay,
yeah, that,
good.
no, you're right on track. Like, I'm very connected here. So the having irritability, anxiety, depression, this is when it starts to get a little bit worse. But for example, someone I know, their number one symptom of having, when I know that their blood sugar is a little bit off, is mood issues. So that person becomes irritable, anxious, and depressed, like number one symptom. And that is, I mean, how many people struggle with that and, do all sorts of therapy? It's like, we need to work on the physiological piece first, and then of course the emotional, spiritual piece on top of it. So it's like, imagine how much we can just come back up to like baseline, and then we only have to work on this many issues, right? And so
Right.
and it can trigger us to have these irrational thoughts. That's what anxiety is. And it's really coming from, your body is panicking because the blood sugar is dropping. So imagine if we can have this nice even blood sugar, what it would feel like. So again, we might see a few more things that we might see. We might see brain fog or memory issues. This one's really common. I get this one a lot. And some people don't even know they have brain fog until they get off carbs. And they're like, oh my goodness, I have never been this clear in my life. And I have a client who says that she cannot eat carbs during the day if she's at work, because she can't critically think and it impairs her productivity. So, I mean, there's so much brain wise, neurologically, that is going on when we have insulin resistance. That's insulin also takes in nutrients into the cells and glucose. And so if the brain is not getting the glucose and the nutrients it needs,
It's not
imagine
operating.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not operating
Yes.
optimally. Yeah, there's
Yeah.
if you haven't read the book Grain Brain, I highly
Oh, so
recommend
good.
it. It's all about this. I think it's what is Dr. Yeah,
Dr.
Dr.
Perlmutter.
Perlmutter.
Mhm.
And this is one of his premises is that Alzheimer's is actually like what he calls
Type
type
3
3 diabetes.
diabetes.
Again, that diabetes thing, that when you have brain issues, like memory issues, this is really related to blood sugar, insulin resistance. And it's really
Yes.
unfortunate to me in our society that this isn't something that's addressed early on, because this is something that literally takes years to develop. Like
Yes.
when I was diagnosed with hypoglycemia, it had been already
Mhm.
building, right? And then it
Yep.
got to a point where that was diagnosed. And then it took, you know, let's see, another about almost 15 years for me to develop PCOS, like the
Yeah.
symptoms, the host of symptoms they call PCOS now. but
Yeah.
that was with, it took time. And the truth is, if you've already had these symptoms, it's been building for a while. And it's
Yeah.
just so sad to me that this isn't being addressed by mainstream medicine more.
Yeah.
And, that this is like not information we're given. And I, like you, as a kid, I had, recurring sinus infections. I was
Mm-hmm.
sick all the time. And,
Mm-hmm.
I just thought, well, I guess I'm just kind of sickly or whatever. I don't have very good
Yeah.
immune system. But I just think it was
Same.
because I just don't react well to bread and sugar and even fruit. Like I think I probably did myself a disservice because I didn't eat how my body wants to eat. Even fruit, I can't really even eat fruit now because I'm so sensitive to sugar.
Wow. I talk about this all the time, and I feel like I get the most pushback about everything every recommendation I make. The most pushback comes in the area of fruit. I think
Yeah.
we have been told for so long, eat your fruits and vegetables, eat your fruits and vegetables. So people look at fruits like this is this like vitamins and nutrients, and it's so good for you, and it's natural sugar. But I was eating a paleo diet. And
Yeah.
I mean, I was eating sweet potatoes. That's a healthy carb. I was eating acai bowls, healthy carbs with healthy fats on it, shredded coconut, like all this, beautiful stuff, like organic berries and bananas. But I was still having dysregulated blood sugar from just paleo carbs. So imagine
Yep.
I had to cut out fruit too. And that was a huge change for me. And I realized like how dependent I was on fruit, but I tried to add it in when I was eating keto, and I found that it spiked my blood sugar because I measured mine with a blood sugar meter. So I was really hypersensitive to the sugar and fruit. And then I also would notice that it would make me crave sweets.
Yeah.
So,
Because it's
you
sugar.
know,
Even though it's a natural sugar, it
exactly.
still is sugar. Yeah.
Yeah, it would still make me crave a little throughout the day. So when you're deciding what you want to, or experimenting actually with what you want to include in your diet, it's not only what you can get away with, like, oh, berries are keto, so I can include them. It's like, well, how does it make you feel? That should be the question for every food that you eat or meal that you eat. It's like, how does this make you feel? It's like, well, the rest of the day I was thinking about chocolate and I couldn't get it off my brain. That's not how I want to spend my time, like fighting my chocolate dragon. So it wasn't good for me to have those. But now, after 2+ years of being in ketosis, I find that I can definitely add a little bit more. I can have some raspberries and not be like, get sugar, get sugar, get sugar. But it's this very fine line, because I think my body is just a body that is sensitive to carbohydrates and just does much better with fats and proteins.
Yeah, I'm the same. And I think this is why it's really important for everyone to just really pay attention to their body. I really don't believe there's a one diet that fits
Nope.
all kind of approach. I think your genetics are at play. I think your blood type, your history, any,
Your gut
health
bacteria.
conditions that you
Hmm.
have, your gut back, exactly.
Yeah.
So many different factors at play. And for me, like I recently had a genetic test and it was like, I'm a slow carb processor. I just think
Mm,
no matter what, I just don't handle carbs well. I also like am sensitive to caffeine. That was in my genetic test. Like,
me
that's
too.
so many things. Yeah. So some things
Yeah.
that work for some people, they like their coffee, they like their, it's just not going to work for me. And,
Yeah.
and the other thing I get frustrated is people that act like you're just being picky. You're like, my gosh, do you think I do not want to eat fruit? Like, I would love to eat fruit.
Of
Like,
course.
really? It
I
tastes really
know.
good.
They're like, come on, it's healthy. I'm like,
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. And I
just
do
not
think
good for my body.
there's an element of healing, and once you heal some things, you might be able to introduce some things back in. But like you said, it's really important to pay attention to where are you now. And just because
Yeah.
something is quote unquote healthy for mainstream
Yeah.
people or a lot of other people doesn't mean that it's going to be for you. And I
Right.
agree about fruit. I think it should be in small doses. That said, some people handle it better than others. I just don't think I'm ever going to be a person that handles it well. And even as a kid, I remember I would eat like berries and I would feel sick to my stomach. And
Oh,
berries are
wow.
one of those things that are in like paleo. They're like, all fruit except berries are okay. And I'm like, no, not for me.
Yeah.
Just really pay attention to your body and pay attention.
Hmm.
Anytime you're in a craving cycle, like an addictive craving cycle, I think that's usually a sign that there's something off in the body, because your body is trying to
Hmm.
boost itself up. Or you also may have things in your body, because I think a lot of people that have insulin resistance also have, for example, have parasites. And parasites, I don't know if that's something you've explored,
Interesting.
but
Not as
they're
much.
there are parasites that literally give you diabetes and insulin issues. So,
Wow.
you know, but parasites will give you major cravings. They
Absolutely.
crave
Yeah. And
sugar, they
having
crave.
candida and yeah,
Hmm.
imbalances of certain bacteria.
Yeah.
And yeah, I've definitely seen that. So yeah, if anything is like a super strong craving, like as humans, we don't, I mean, I want to say like besides maybe pregnancy, I've never been pregnant, so I can't speak to that and I haven't
Yeah.
studied it, but I feel like we shouldn't have strong cravings for
Right.
anything. Like I don't ever crave anything because my body is nourished. And if, you know, maybe once in a while I'd be in the mood for something, but if you are having cravings, I totally agree. I think it is a sign of some kind of imbalance for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah. Your
Yeah.
body's trying to get more energy, or there's something in your body,
Yeah.
candida, parasite, whatever, that's
Hmm.
it's trying to get what it needs. And then you get a craving. The more I learn about
Yeah.
parasites, the more I'm like, oh my God, this is so crazy how much we're impacted
Right.
by, little things in our
Yeah.
bodies. Oh my gosh, well,
Yeah.
this has been so fun, and I think very informative. I'm sure this is going to help a lot of people. Is there anything else you'd like to share? Tips
Yeah, I
for
did
how to,
want to
and I'll,
talk about, oh, I'm sorry. I did want to talk about the inflammation piece because we
oh,
didn't touch on
sure.
that
Yeah.
much. So, inflammation, number one thing you can do to reduce your inflammation is get out processed foods. Processed
Yeah.
foods react in your body just like sugar, they inflame us. So sugar inflames us, processed food inflames us. And when you are inflamed, that's your immune system working to like all over your body, working really hard to try to heal you, but it's actually causing a lot of damage. And when our immune system is busy inflaming us because we, ate a brownie, it's not able to fight off other things like coronavirus, so
No, totally.
yeah, so lowering your inflammation is really, really big. Some other things like swapping out things in your household, cleaners, personal care products, makeup, perfumes, things like that, swapping them out for healthier alternatives, which I'm sure you talk about in your show and that
Definitely.
you do in your own lifestyle, is having this clean lifestyle, controlling the factors that we can control, because we are just bombarded from every angle with pesticides and xenoestrogens and toxins and pollution and fertilizers. Just everything is just so toxic. So to be able to reduce that toxic load can really help with our lowering the inflammation. And one of the best things for inflammation and for lowering insulin resistance is intermittent fasting. And if you can't fast, like you said that you
Yeah,
can't fast.
even after I've modified my diet, I just makes me
Yeah,
feel exhausted, and like it doesn't pass. Like I just feel
right.
terrible. So I've just realized like I'm just not a good faster.
I'm not a good morning faster, but I can
Mhm.
definitely move my dinner up or eliminate my dinner. So a lot of people associate fasting with skipping breakfast, but I'm not a skip breakfast kind of gal. I wake up, I am ready to eat. I have always been like that my whole life. So I don't know if you've experimented with fasting more in the evening. Have you done that
I
or
just
no?
know literally.
Okay.
When I was like full on in my hypoglycemic, time in my life,
Right.
I was eating like every hour and a half to 2 hours. I'm not
Right.
like that, but I still do have a very fast metabolism, and even when I eat, keto, I still just burn through things, and it just
Mm-hmm.
I've tried several times doing it in different ways, and I just end up feeling just really drained and exhausted. So I just think my particular
Yeah.
body type just doesn't handle it well. But
But
if you
that's so
can,
good
I
to
think it's
know.
amazing. Yeah.
Right.
But
But that's such a testament to
Mhm.
like bioindividuality, and the whole
Yeah.
everything that I talk about is bioindividuality and self-experimentation. You
Yeah.
have to try it on yourself and you have to listen to your body. So if you want to get started with intermittent fasting, what I recommend to people is that they look at what their eating window is. Let's say you wake up and you eat at 7, that's your first meal, and then your last meal is at 7. That means you have 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of fasting. So then what I would recommend is just to start to close that window by a half an hour, by an hour, and then see how that feels. Get used to that. Then close it by another half an hour, hour. see how that feels, keep going, and go until you feel comfortable. A lot of people do what's called a 16-8, where they will fast for 16 hours of the day, eat for 18 hours of the day, 8 hours, sorry, 8 hours of the day, inventing hours of the day, right? It's how long I feel sometimes in quarantine now. So they would do 8 hours of eating, 16 hours of fasting, and this can help dramatically improve insulin resistance and reduce your inflammation, because you're kind of getting out of your body's way. You know, a lot of times as humans, we're like, what can we do? What can we do? But it's just kind of like that meditation piece. It's like sit, wait, and let your body heal. You know, you ever see that meme, like sit, stay, heal? It's like a pun with, you know, dogs. And so if we're just, you know, not eating, we're allowing our body to tap into all these innate mechanisms it has for self-healing and kind of cleaning itself out through a process called autophagy. And it can really help your immune system, and it's very, very powerful. But again, you want to listen to your own body. If it doesn't feel good, then you want to, of course, eat. But thinking about, even if you can maybe go from eating 6 small meals a day to eating 3 meals, that's also going to have a huge benefit, because we're not spiking our insulin every few hours. So play around with those kind of things and stay consistent with them, and then see the difference it makes. It will be pretty big. So those are some of those tips that I have.
One of the things I want to address, and you touched on it briefly, is how when you're in this mode, when you're in insulin resistance, you know, and you have PCOS, your body's in stress mode. You're not operating optimally. And there's a lot of worries right now about coronavirus. It is definitely a serious illness, but I've gotten the message psychically that a lot of people that they're saying are quote unquote healthy have undiagnosed health and medical issues. I mean, I was one of those people for years, you know, so if this had hit 10 years ago, it's likely I would be very sick or you know, maybe even worse. And so just to mention that, because I feel like one of the things this is doing is showing the sort of bar of health in our country and in the world is actually pretty low. And
totally agree.
And diet, lifestyle, this is our number one defense, because if your immune system is under stress, you get a microbe or something, and like, it's going to be a big deal. But when you're in a healthier state, it's not a big deal. And I think there's a lot of people have undiagnosed insulin resistance, undiagnosed, you know, pre-diabetes or even some diabetes. And this is a risk, you know, that this is a really good time to look at this. And so focusing on what you said, eating, you know, less sugars, refined
eating less frequently,
foods. So really great. It's really timely and important right now, especially.
We see the studies are showing that the people who are faring worse with coronavirus and the complications are mostly those who have dysregulated blood sugar. So that's why this has like far-reaching effects. Our blood sugar is a foundational root cause of so many issues with our health. And so if we can start to dial that in, you can't even imagine the type of health you can unlock with all areas of your life, because blood sugar regulation affects every single area of our whole physiology. It affects our brain, it affects our mouth, like our teeth, and our heart, our gut bacteria, our liver, our kidneys. It affects every blood vessel in our whole body. So this is a full body thing. And so it's really important to start to get under control, so then you can have that improved immunity and just feel better, and, you know, model health for other people. People will be like, what are you doing? You know, you share that. It's a ripple effect. That's what we want to put out into the world, you know, like everyone getting healthy. Imagine, you know, people talk about like herd immunity. It's like, what better way to do that than to get everybody just healthier? So we have, you know, more resistance to these things. And
so that you can be one of those asymptomatic people where you would have got it and you didn't even know, because your body was so strong, it just like fought it off and you weren't even aware of it. I really do think that that's possible. And I think that part of what's happening is this paradigm, you know, shifting, hopefully, from people being more awareness of that, and also, you know, showing that our health is really important. Like, you can't just like ignore, you know, work your crazy stressful job, caffeinate and wine to get through the day, and then like, and
Right.
like then push your body, like your body is trained to tell you something. And also, I've been shown articles that one of the risk factors for younger people, especially that are dying from coronavirus, is that they're overweight. But again, like this is, if you're overweight, you're very likely to be insulin resistant.
100%. Yeah. And so is it the weight or is it the insulin resistance that's really causing the issues? There are 12%, that's a number I heard, but some small percentage of people who are insulin resistant or diabetic who aren't overweight. So you don't have to be overweight to have issues with blood sugar. So I just wanted to throw that out there because some people, might think that that's, a necessary factor, but it isn't.
Oh yeah, until I developed PCOS, I was thin. I was one of those, like, I could eat 3 plates full of food and like, I could eat ice cream and candy and chocolate and everything all the time. And I was thin, but I still had blood sugar issues. So yeah, definitely. And insulin resistance. So yeah, it's definitely important to mention.
Yeah. And I did want to say that a lot of people are definitely emotionally eating right now. And I see that from everywhere. And
it's understandable, by the way, like this is a really stressful time.
That's what I was going to say. Like, everyone this is obviously unprecedented. None of us have ever experienced this before. And it's totally normal that we would have these types of reactions. However, I want to, I see a lot of people saying like, oh, I deserve a cupcake, or I deserve this. I deserve this after, a long day of taking care of my kids in quarantine. But I feel like you deserve healthy food. You deserve to have good immunity and energy and feel vitality. And so I just wanted to kind of like throw that out there. So people might start to play with kind of flipping that script that they have in their head. Like, oh, I deserve this. It's like, you don't deserve the consequences that are going to come with it. Like you deserve to have peace in your life. Like, what are you looking for when you have that cookie? Like you want a moment of feel good hormones, right? That make you feel safe and make you feel comforted. So how can we kind of find that through another avenue that is also going to be supportive of your mental health? Because at the end of the day, when we have, like you said, your depression, that came with an anxiety that comes with these blood sugar issues. So if we can eat foods that nourish our body and support these feel-good neurotransmitters and hormones in our bodies, we can feel so much better overall, and we can stop that cycle of, like, I don't feel well, so I'm going to eat a cookie, and then the cookie makes me not feel well, so I need to eat another one. And it's like,
or have a caffeinated drink or something.
Right. And it's no judgment at all. Like I have been there. I was there, like probably the other day I, did this. So, I can talk, but like it's a practice, just like meditation, it's a practice, and no one's expecting perfection, but focusing on your why, focusing on your goals, setting some boundaries for yourself, like as self-love, people talk about self-love and self-care practices all the time. I don't know any self-care practice that's greater than saying no to something that makes us feel like garbage. So just some things to throw out there.
Yeah, I feel like a lot of times with food, people are it's almost like being in an abusive relationship, where it's like, oh, I feel good right now, and then it gets toxic, and like, and then there's sort of makeup phase or whatever where things feel better for a while. That what I realized about my relationship with sugar was that it was very toxic, because I would feel good at first, but then there was like if you've ever been in a relationship with an abuser, it was like the feel good rush from sugar was like everything's great, and then it was like, and then you get hit in the face or whatever, or insults you and calls you horrible names, and that's to me when you're addicted to sugar, that's what it's like. It's like feels really good when it's good, and then it feels really bad when you're in the crash phase.
Yes.
And there are foods that aren't gonna, do that for you.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Wow. I never thought of that. And I love that analogy, although it's sad, but it's very accurate. It's very accurate. And, if you're addicted to sugar, it's not your fault. And sugar is like so addictive. So if you can't stop, like, please just try to, you know, have your intention be to not blame and shame yourself, because this isn't your fault. This is like beyond. So I mean, there are so many programs out there to start, you know, reducing your dependency on sugar. I have a free program that I offer. It's called the Sugar Free 30 program. And all of the elements of the program are designed to target underlying insulin resistance. So it's really great. Some people have, I mean, lost 28 pounds on, I mean, crazy stuff, but it's not only food, but it's also lifestyle. You know, you have to go on a walk every day. You have to do 20 minutes of a relaxation exercise. So this is like a holistic type of program that looks at all areas of our life. And I think it's important that when we start to look at, if we're talking about addiction to sugar, like the mental, emotional, spiritual piece
Sure.
that come with that. So
Sure. Yeah. Like, why do we feel like we need a boost? You know,
yeah.
it saves us about our life. There was a study that was done, I think it was in France, and they addicted rats to cocaine water.
And sugar water.
Yeah, and then they gave them the choice, and I've heard it's been done with sugar, and then also with like you know, one of the non-nutritive chemical sweeteners. I can't remember which one.
Yeah.
But basically, the sweet, so whether it's sugar or like, you know, the diet sugar
Yeah.
substitute, and the rats every time would choose the sugar. And so that means it's more addictive than cocaine, guys. And this is what we give our kids at birthday parties. This is like a soothing treat. So yeah, it's not your fault, because this is a societal thing that we're just like somehow accepted and be like, this is okay. And it really is an addictive substance. I'm not a person that says like we should ban sugar. No, I don't think that's the you know, the way to handle this at all. But at the same time, to recognize this is a chemical substance.
We should look at it for what it is.
Yeah, treat it like a chemical substance, and you want to, you know, have wine or whatever, that's fine, but you recognize that it's a substance, and sugar is a substance, like chemically, it has reactions in the bodies, we can get addicted to it. And so, yeah, not to beat yourself up over it, but also at the same time to understand. And I think your approach, looking at it holistically, because there's another study where they addicted, I think it was rats to cocaine water, and then they were like by themselves in the cage, and then they were like drinking it all the time. But then when they put them in like a little rat haven with like other rats and like a community, they didn't want it anymore. So like, it's also showing you, if you're feeling like you need this, like what is it in your life that you need to shift, you know, to not feel like you need an addictive boost, you know, in your life.
Oh, I love that.
Complex.
I love it.
Well, this has been so fun. If people want to learn more, connect with you, your program, et cetera, what is the best way for them to do that?
Sure. My Instagram, I'm on most often. That is at Danielle Hamilton Health. And my Facebook is also at Danielle Hamilton Health. And my website, you guessed it, daniellehamiltonhealth.com.
Well, this has been really great. Thank you so much for talking with us today.
Absolutely. It was my pleasure.
And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you'd like more information about me, you can go to my website, healingpowers.net. You can also follow me on Twitter at that Laura Powers, Instagram at Laura Powers 44, and on Facebook at Healing Powers.